Alright, so hello you people, how y'all doing? So I figured some of you might remember this video I made about 4 months ago, which is on tips on how to improve performance on Mate. And it's all handy and stuff, handy dandy, but I figured, hey, let's just show you some of the things that you can do to improve the performance on your Linux system. This video is actually related to this guide right here. It's an old one. You shouldn't really use it, only if you really want to. It has some other things in it, you know. It's a mess. It doesn't really help that much with performance. So one of the things that I devised and tried to do and tested already was actually a customized and a better improved version of reducing latency and improving the performance in your Linux system. To be frank with you, when it comes to gaming on Linux, most of the problems are usually related to the audio itself. Now I have here this part on how you can, you don't really have to be in the audio and video groups. Don't know why I have it there, because it really does improve performance. In my case, it does work. And what you can do is do certain things to it to make it like run better on your system. So basically what you want to do is you want to first make sure that you're running pretty much a fairly modern distribution of Linux. In my case, I'm running my general Linux, the latest update that I installed. Also, one more thing, you wanna make sure that you have the latest updates installed, just in case something may happen. And as you can read over here, can I zoom in on this? Okay, view, themes. Okay, we can say tonight, that's easier to read, I guess. Or a pixel. A pixel makes it look a bit harder to read. Whitey is a bit of an interesting one. Okay, so, you know what, let's set it to night, because it will look prettier. So, first off, some things. So the basics, so the things you should already know is you should install the proper graphics drivers for your GPU. If you're running an AMD GPU, you should already have the latest drivers just by upgrading your kernel. If there are normal updates, you should be fine, and you should be already running the latest version of your driver. If you're running a NVIDIA GPU, I would suggest installing the proprietary ones. However, if your GPU is as old as mine, I wouldn't recommend installing those. It's actually more beneficial for you to use the open source ones if your GPU is older than 10 years. If it's more than 10 years, I would recommend using the open source drivers instead. Or if it's a mobile GPU, don't even bother installing those drivers, because some people were contacting me and they had some problems installing those drivers, so I wouldn't really recommend it. After doing all of that, you also need to make sure that you install the multi-lib stuff for your drivers. If you're running a distribution, obviously, it also depends on distribution mostly, but this is still related to the drivers. And the other thing I should mention is you should try and use a fast window manager like OpenBox or i3. I tested this on both of these, and there is a small performance improvement, but in my case it's really a small one. So in fact, all my games and such that and tests that I did ran better within the Plasma desktop environment, or KDE, which is what I'm using right now, and it ran much better over here than it did on i3 or an OpenBox, but your mileage may vary. So some stuff that you should do first. First, we'll start with the safe stuff that obviously helps quite a bit. So every time you want to run an app, you can disable and then re-enable pulse audio as a regular user. The way you'll be able to do this is by running pulse audio-k to disable it and pulse audio-d to re-enable it. I have two separate scripts for this. You can actually cut them out. I think it's, yeah, disable pulse audio, and I think it's, yeah, enable pulse audio. It still says disable pulse audio, ignore that. So pretty much I have these two scripts right here. The first one disables pulse audio and the second one enables it. I still have disable set over here, just ignore that. But basically what's important to remember is that we're pretty much trying to get the most out of our system with this, and we want to make sure that it, you know, like pretty much refreshes itself so that our application gets the highest priority. For example, I have a game installed on my system in which I use the scripts on here. One easy method you can do this is, if you're planning on playing games on your Linux system, is by using a gaming launcher or a gaming platform like Lutris, and just give it some time. And if you use it, for example, I have this one game here called Osu. I don't play that much, but it's just an example. You would go into settings of your game, then you would go into, I think it was runner options. No, it was system options, and you wanna enable the show advanced options, and then you wanna add the pre-launch script to disable pulse audio and the post exit script to enable pulse audio again, just to be sure that it runs properly on your system. This thing I'll explain later on, just stay with me here for a while, I'll explain it real soon. So after doing that, you should actually like save it and you could try and test it out. It runs faster, much faster than it did before. So the other thing that's actually important, so as you can see, I'm recommending for you to use separate scripts for this because it makes sense. You want to use a separate script for that. Next thing to do is we have to give ALSA a higher priority because we want to make sure that the most amount of performance is given to our audio system with the game being run. Obviously our game will get a higher priority, but we also don't want to cause it to run slower in any case. So what we want to do is to do that, we basically need to edit this file in etc security called limits.conf, and let me just copy this, and we can open it using Vim over here. And pretty much what this file contains is all bunch of stuff that you can change, but things you want to add in are these things right here. So what this says is it pretty much makes it so that everyone that's in the audio group will get these set up. One of the major things that is important here is you can is actually the memlock, thing, which pretty much tells it how much memory is allowed for it to be used. I let it use 512 megs of my RAM, but you can decide how much you need. In my case, 512 works great, so I'm using 512 for this. And that's pretty much all you have to do. You just add these 3 lines before the end of file right here, and then you restart your system and you should notice a performance improvement, which is one of the major things that really helps with improving performance. So just bear that in mind. The nice -15 basically is, if you remember my video about tweaking audio settings, this pretty much changes the audio for all the apps that are running. But in my case, there's not much of a difference between using -11 and -19. However, -19 happens to have a lower latency, so I would recommend that you use -19 for this. Okay, so after we've changed that, there's some things I should mention. There are a bunch of other frequently asked questions on the official WineHQ page when it comes to playing games and such. I applied some settings and changed some things around based on these things. Links are clickable, so you can have a look at these. You can also adjust Jack D2's buffer size using a bridge. basically it will make you able to shave off a few milliseconds of latency, but it also depends on what you're doing. There's also the minimal latency. I have actually 256 or 120. When it comes to this, but basically you want to run this thing as sudo, and what this will do is, let me just copy this, and if you run this as sudo, actually I don't think it's gonna, okay, it's going to ask for my password. As you can see, it doesn't say anything for me, but from what I've seen, the minimal latency pretty much depends on what audio card you're using, and I've seen a lot of people reporting that this number gave them around this latency, so I wrote it in here, but I also wrote out with which you should start. I personally use 128 as well, because it happens to work with my audio card or my system. You might want to tweak this depending on what you need, but it really depends on you. Yeah, you pretty much need the cadence package, so you need to install that either through the AUR or with your package manager. Install the cadence package and you should be able to figure this out. But all of this is to shave off just a few milliseconds of latency. Again, it may be beneficial to you to do so, but it just, for me, I haven't really applied almost any of this. The only thing I changed was the latency manually, so that's that. For some graphics tablets and such, you can change some things around, but this is only if you're planning on playing games where you just need to get better like mouse movement and such. So again, you can change the latency at which, pretty much the rate at which the refresh rate of your mouse and tablet. That's what we're trying to change here with this following thing. So pretty much what we're doing here is we're telling it, hey, I need you to use a lower refresh rate on the input devices that you have. To do so, you need to edit your etcmode.conf file. Let me just copy this and open it up in Vim so you guys know what I'm doing. So pretty much what you need to do is you need to set your mouse pulse settings. I set it to 2, just like I have in the guide, to 500 milliseconds. To 500 Hertz, which is about 2 milliseconds of latency. You can change this to 1 if you want to, but it's not really recommended to do so. And there's also one more thing. I'm using a USB audio card, so I'm using also this pod right here, which is right at the bottom, and pretty much what this says is, hey, I want you to use this audio card, which happens to improve the performance slightly, but it's better to shave off as much latency as you can to make sure that it runs better. And all of this that we've just applied won't be applied until we load the modules for them. To do so, we need to actually create a new file instead of our etc modulesload.d folder. So to do so, we're going to actually quit out of here, and we're going to open up a file, or pretty much create a file. So if it's not created automatically for you, you wanna create it on your own, either by using Vim or the touch command, and then you wanna paste in this this section, which is for the directory. I called it lower input to know that it's the lower input latency, and what I have here are these USB HID, which is to apply the refresh rate for the mouse, SND USB audio, that's to apply the latency for my USB card, and SNDA loop is for applying the latency for my audio. Next we go to the really fun stuff that is quite advanced, but hopefully will make a lot of sense in the long run. There are also a bunch of other things you can do, but you know, it's up to you. So we're going to clear this, and we're going to now talk about some advanced optimizations. So I have a bunch of things here documented and explained. For example, like compiling and such. You can try and compile some things depending on what you're doing. These were tested on my system running Manjaro Linux. So some of these commands may not work for your system, but if you're using a Arch-based distribution, these should work just fine. one of the major things you can do is actually using a lower latency kernel or a real-time kernel. One of the things, however, is that it's not actually the only thing you can do. You can also use a CK patch, which is basically a patch that helps with managing all the instructions being sent by your operating system to make sure that those which are higher priority get actually execute first before anything else, so it doesn't get interrupted by anything, which in the end results in a faster response time. To put it in layman's terms, the quicker we can solve problems, the faster RPC will work and the lower latency we will have, which is important if you're working with really high performance dependent stuff, for example like gaming or video editing, where you need the lowest amount of latency possible to see the changes in real time, or for game developers especially. You can also, change the also one more thing I can recommend you is if you're using a splash screen, you can use the FB decoder, which is a utility that pretty much helps with improving performance when you're logging into your system. It's not much, but it's a really small amount which may change the way your system behaves in the long run. I'm just checking if we have dropped any frames. Doesn't seem we did. So next, after having changed all of this that's in here, there's another thing we need to do. So next we need to increase the priority levels so that we can actually use all the latency improvements to the fullest of their capability. To do this, we need to actually edit this file right here, which is under etc security limits.d, and it's 91-nice.config. Again, if you don't have this file, you might have to create it. To do this, you just type in your text editor and the path along with the file. I already have it, but here's something you need to change. I have this typed in here as username here. What you need to do is you need to tell it, hey, pick this user as the user you want to use to run the apps, which in most of the times you'll be running it as your regular user. So you need to make sure that you know your username. Your username usually appears on your terminal as the first section. So if I open up another terminal, pretty much in my case it's this thing right here. Let me just zoom in. So if you open up your terminal, it should be this first thing before the thing. This should be your username. That's what you type in. So as you can see, it matches with this on my system, so you need to change it based on your system. Next is this thing. So I mentioned that I'll actually explain this command. So you might have noticed this command right here. What this pretty much does is it will pretty much force it to start using the nice-n4 parameter, which if you look over here is which is what we've set. So pretty much what this command does, it pretty much makes sure that it uses the nice-4 parameter as we've defined over here in this file, as you can see right here. So that's what we're pretty much defining over here for the app to use. Also, if you have enabled BFQ at any point or at any time, I can't really show how you can check for this, but I for a fact know that I don't have BFQ enabled. It pretty much is enabled in the last step somewhere. So here you can enable BFQ with a few more other settings you can change, but again, I don't need this, so it's really up to you. You would have to use it without the IO nice thing, but since I don't have it enabled, I use the IO nice thing inside of my configuration for the game that I'm playing, and I put it into the command prefix, which pretty much says, hey, I want you to use this as the command prefix to make sure that it runs. So it will run the game with this prefix, therefore saying, hey, use this command to make sure that it runs with using the parameter that we gave it. So yeah, that's that. All of this will make a smaller improvement, but this next one will be a pretty huge one if you're running from a hard drive. So let me actually close this and clear this out. So the next one you want to do is you want to set your swappiness. The swappiness pretty much says how quickly it can swap between your pages, and the thing that's related to it is actually your swap file or your swap partition. Now I do in fact have a swap partition, I think. Yes, I do have a swap partition. I have a 8 gig swap partition. So pretty much what we're telling here is, hey, I want you to set the swappiness to 10, which pretty much is the highest as I think I can go. You can try go even higher, like, you know, to reduce the latency, but it's not generally recommended. Most of the time, a lot of people recommend that you use the VM swappiness to 10, which is a noticeable improvement on major distributions, and especially if you're running on lower end hardware. So I would recommend that you use the swappiness equal 10 parameter to make sure that it runs at a faster speed, which is cool. But to make it permanent, there's one thing you can do. You can pretty much edit this file, right? Oops. Can I redo this? Undo, there we go. So you want to change this file right here. What this file is, it's a systemctl file inside of your etc folder, which will set parameters once you start your system. And by setting it to 10, we're pretty much making it permanent, so we don't have to rerun the command every single time. So that's that. After typing in the vm.swappiness equal 10, it will pretty much always use this parameter at boot, so you don't have to worry about this. Next is one thing I wouldn't actually recommend you do, but if you're looking for the highest performance without like, you know, thinking about your data, this is another thing you can do. We can disable the fs check after startup. What the fs check says is it's pretty much going to check your file system every single time you boot up your system. So one thing you might have noticed every single time you boot up your Linux machine is there shows up with the the dev SDA1 or SDA2, and then with the amount of files out of a certain amount of files that I checked. That's pretty much it. If you disable this, you will sacrifice a bit of like a sense of security per se, because you're pretty much giving up, you know, checking your file system for any errors. But you will get a bit of performance because it's not gonna keep on constantly checking your drive like, hey, do you have this or is everything okay? By disabling it, you're pretty much saying it, hey, I don't want you to check anything. So it will just bail along, it won't check for anything. I wouldn't recommend this if you have a critical like files and such. But again, if you don't care about any of this, again, it's up to you. You can use this. I'm using it. So far, no problems at all. Obviously, this was after a few weeks of, well, about a week of testing, making sure that everything works. But so far, everything works fine. So next thing, so to do this, you need to open up this file right here, which is under etc, and it's called Fstab. So what you want to do is you want to open it up, and let me actually resize this so you guys can, so you guys can see everything. Okay, there we go, which means I have to bring up my tutorial again. So once you open the file, you'll see a file structure similar to yours, but it will be somewhat different. I'm using Nano for this, sue me. But pretty much what's important to change is you'll notice you'll have here you'll have these ones over here, or 0 and a 1. What this says, it's going to check pretty much each and every different partition. Both of these should actually be set to 1. If they are not, you can make sure to set both of them to 1 to make sure it constantly checks your file system. But I've set both of these to 0 to disable the checking of your file system, because, you know, I don't need it. I'm not scared that something will break. So I've disabled it just by doing this, and this will like tell it, hey, you can just bail along, don't even bother checking my drives, which actually, if you're running on a hard drive just like I am, it actually does improve performance by quite a bit, because it doesn't have to check for each and every file that you're opening, which does indeed reduce latency in a lot of games, because a lot of games are loading stuff from your hard drive into memory and it has to constantly check for them. By disabling this check, it actually won't bother checking, we just send it straight to the memory and it will load it up quickly. In layman's terms, disabling the file system check will improve the system response times, therefore making it feel faster and snappier. Again, on higher end systems or mid-range systems, you won't notice a difference, especially if you're running an SSD or a faster hard drive. But again, if you want to get the most performance without sacrificing your hard drive's speed, capability, which is greatly improved with Linux, it will actually be improved far more just by setting this up. There's actually another thing you can do, and that's to set up how big of a transfer speed you want to have. I'm not gonna get into detail about this because I wasn't able to get it to work on any of my VMs. Usually when I'm doing these videos, I do a lot of preparation inside of a VM and checking, and if something breaks, and okay, don't do this, it will break. And I keep on checking, changing things around inside of a VM, and then I go ahead and apply it on my system. There is still a bit of risk involved with this stuff though. If you do this the way that I'm doing, running it in a VM and it works there, what may happen is it actually may not even work properly on your system in the end. Just because it works on mine, it doesn't mean that it will work on yours, but I'm pretty much making sure that it works on every system just by using different distributions of Linux. Hence why I actually mentioned that you can actually do this even on different distributions. So that's why I mentioned that I tested it on Ubuntu and Linux Mint and Debian and also Fedora. On all four of these it runs fine. It's just, you need to make sure that you do this correctly, especially this last part. If you screw this up in any way, shape or form, it will cause your system not to boot. So make sure to just change the 2 zeros at the end over here and nothing else. If you change anything else, don't come to me saying your PC is not working anymore. Just change the last two. These last things, just change these last zeros, these last ones to zeros, and you should be fine. And this is pretty much all that there's to it. You can also enable the swap, change some other things around. I'm not gonna show you how to do this because it is really dependent on your distribution, but most of the time a swap is really necessary. For example, I'm using a 8 gig, okay, it's currently not enabled, which is weird, I'll have to enable it, but once I enable it, I should see a performance improvement. But pretty much what's important to remember is you actually get a lot more performance out of. If you're wondering why my CPU usage is this high, that's because I'm recording, so that's why it's so high. But that's pretty much it. I'm going to have to enable my swap again. But make sure to have your swap set up to really notice a performance boost. As you can see, I talked about all these performance benefits even without a swap being enabled. I'm going to re-enable it though because I really need it. So yeah, just bear that in mind. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope this was of some use for all of you guys, because I am really trying hard with these videos, trying to make them as fun as I possibly can, or accessible even. So yeah, if you like these types of videos and if this helped, let me know. And if you have any sort of issues and such, you can ask me. I'll try and answer most of the things. I'm going to upload this file right now, to my GitHub and upload this video, so you guys know that there's a lot more content to be had on this channel than just other things. I'm concentrating even on performance improvements under Linux. So yeah, I'm actually working on a video right now showing you how I set up my hard drive and there I'm going to show you how you can actually set up your swap partition, because it's something that quite a few people actually want to see from what I've seen on all my other videos and other DMs that I got about my Linux videos. So yeah, make sure to stay safe, have fun, and I will see you guys in hopefully the next video. Just make sure to don't do anything weird. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Around 200 megs, it's far smaller than it was before. That's great. So yeah, see ya.